So on Wednesday night, I went up in front of the congregation and said, hey, I'm getting mobilized to Iraq. I want to take care of my family while I'm gone. And it was all, hugs and tears. And on Friday, I was outed to the world as a crossdresser. Someone got a picture off of our Tri-State TG website that we had and emailed the picture to everybody they knew, who emailed to everybody they knew. And people were printing them out and posting them up at the bars and at the school and everywhere else.
What?
So that was my blowing out of the closet story. I mean, a lot of my friends and most of my family knew, but this was like exploded. So within 5 days, I went from you're going to Iraq to we love you to Friday and blown out of the closet to Monday, the church council saying you're no longer welcome here.
Welcome to Pride Stories, the podcast, where we celebrate the entire spectrum of experiences that make up the LGBTQ plus community. I'm your host, Max Kingan from Tell Well Story Co. in studio. On this podcast, we're committed to creating a safe, supportive, and inspiring space for our guests and listeners alike. So join us as we explore the heartwarming, sometimes painful, and always inspired stories that make us who we are. Hi, and welcome to Pride Stories, the podcast from Tell Well Story Co., where we celebrate the entire spectrum of the LGBTQIA plus ecosystem. I'm Max Kingan, your host and chief storyteller at Tell Well. And with me today in studio, I have Bradley Awney.
Hi.
Bradley, it's so good to have you in studio, and thanks for being a part of this.
This is great. Yeah, thanks for having me.
How are you feeling coming into podcast day?
Well, I'm doing okay. Yeah, I've done a couple different podcasts over my last number of years, and it's always a little kind of nerve-wracking because you never know what you're going to say, but it'll be good.
Well, what's fun about this podcast, there's no agenda. There's nothing that we're trying to accomplish with it other than just sharing your story. And so take a breath, be yourself. This is going to be really great. So just before we hopped on the microphones, we were talking about how we met, because we met a couple of years ago at one of the grand openings, like a ribbon cutting for a local nonprofit.
Yes. Yeah, I've been a part of the Chamber Ambassadors here in Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo for 4 years. And, I enjoy getting out and seeing what's new or who's expanding and the different businesses. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, what I also loved is from there, then we seem to run into each other all the time,
right.
Several times over the rest of that summer. And then since then, we've run into each other a bunch of times. I feel like oftentimes they have to do a cider at our favorite local cidery, Wild Terra.
Yeah, that's right next door.
And frankly, we can pop down there for a cider afterwards if we want to.
Right.
But you've been a big part of this community. You've been a figurehead in this community. You've done a lot of work for veterans. You've done a lot of work for the trans community in town. And so what I kind of want to start with is just, who is Bradley for somebody who's never met you?
Sure. And I've been doing outreach and talks at schools, universities, community events for many years, 25 years, I think it's been. I've been going out and telling my story, so to speak. And I don't like necessarily labels and that kind of thing, but if you had to put me in a label, I'm a crossdresser, gender nonconforming, that type of thing, because I'm very comfortable with my feminine side and I'm very comfortable with my masculine side, and I present both ways throughout my day and throughout my week. So that's just part of who I am, and just kind of being me. And sometimes I'm more feminine, sometimes I'm more masculine, and I just enjoy being me and being out there.
I love that. Now, and I've gotten to experience you presenting in both ways, and I think that's really powerful to feel very comfortable going back and forth. What got you to that comfortability?
Well, it goes back in time now, growing up in rural farm kid, North Dakota, and when you're young, you play dress up with your sister or whatever out at the farm and putting on a mom's, old dress or something like that, out in the playhouse. And for something in my brain that clicked, this is okay. This is something I, enjoy. But back in those days, in the 70s, growing up, that was not okay and not to be done. So you had that conflict going on, on through high school, and I'd play dress up with my mom and sisters and dad were out of town or in town, I should say, because we were farm kids. So, I'd do that. But I was worried that I was going to get caught because I knew something in my brain or something in the society that boys should not play dress up as girls. And that was something I'd lived with throughout my high school days. And then after high school, I was very involved in everything in school. I placed in wrestling in state. I was state champion football, middle linebacker, all that masculine stuff. But I also had this very strong feminine push for whatever reason. I couldn't figure it out. There was no internet. There was none of that. Nobody to talk to about it. So I just kind of stumbled through trying to figure things out. And then after high school, I joined the Marine Corps because I wanted to be a Marine and go see the world. And I did. I was Marine infantry. We were a special operations group that would, go out on ships and go anywhere in the world and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I saw some combat in the Persian Gulf before the Persian Gulf War, and did all that and flying around helicopters and crazy boats and amphibious vehicles and mountaineer training, jungle survival training, all this crazy training. And I enjoyed all that, but I still had in the back of my mind, or in my mind, sometimes in the front of my mind, wanted to express my feminine side. And so that was difficult. And then basically back in those days, you had to lie about any kind of different, because it was illegal or unacceptable to be gay in the military. And at that point, if I would have caught me playing dress up or expressing myself femininely, I would have been kicked out of the Marine Corps for being gay. That was way before the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was, back in the late 80s. So,
wow. That you just cruised through like 30 years of history in like 2 minutes. That was very quick. But
there's a lot that goes on with that. Yeah. But yeah, I can go for hours here, but
Can you kind of take us back to, as you're in high school, you realize like this is something that is a part of you, but you're in the 70s, you said?
Well, I graduated in 85.
Okay.
So high school was in the 80s, early 80s. Yeah.
Okay. So you're in the 80s. There's really no representation. There's where are you from?
Mayville.
You're from Mayville. Okay. I'm from Enderlin.
Yeah.
And so there really was no representation of anything other than like gender conforming, like cis, white, male, female, like it was all very much that. So what started to broaden your horizon that there was an outcome where you could express both your masculine and your feminine sides?
Well, it took a while before I got to that point, but I would basically be closeted, cross-dressing or whatever kind of thing. And I was going to college, came back from the Marine Corps, joined the Army National Guard, was going to college at Mayville State. And, then I got married and I hadn't told my wife at the time about me I didn't even know what cross-dressing was, but I got a degree in psychology. So in one of our books, I read the definition of a cross-dresser and I'm like, I'm a crossdresser. Because back then you only had like 3 definitions. It was like transgender, transsexual, and crossdresser. And that was it. We got a lot more variations these days, but that was what was in the psychology book back in the early 90s.
Isn't it powerful when you see something that like resonates with you and you're like, oh, there's a term for this.
Yeah, I had no idea.
I feel like that is most of the time that I spend with my therapist is just trying to be like, is there a word for this feeling right here?
Right.
So...
And I told my then wife, I said, well, I'm a crossdresser. And she's like, what is that? I said, well, I have a paragraph that tells what this is, and that's the only information I had. And back then I was like, I want to get more information. So I went to the library, did the online search. Back then there was no internet yet. I always say I got a degree from the college without the aid of the internet. That happened. I graduated in 93, but a year or so before that, there was one book in the state of North Dakota on transgendered issues, and it was at UND. And it was a small book. And so I went up to UND. I read this book from cover to cover in the library because I was petrified someone would know. I checked it out. And then it only took me a couple hours to read this book. It wasn't that big. And that's the only one I could find in the library system back in like 92 in the state of North Dakota that had anything to do with transgendered or whatever, And so then that was one of the pieces of the pie to realize I'm not alone. And then the internet showed up some going through life trying to figure that out. And so I find this group called Tri-S, national group of crossdressers that meet, and they met in Minneapolis was the closest one. So I joined the group and started, communicating through email back then, with some other folks that were like me. And so then I went down to one of their meetings and meet in a conference room, and there's like 40 people there, spouses, people, whatever. And that was the first time I met anyone like myself. And I was about 30 years old then. And I was like, wow, mind-blowing kind of experience.
Was that empowering or was it overwhelming or both?
Both, because I figured I was going to get stoned or beat to death trying to drive across Minneapolis, in the minivan back in the day, because we had young kids and trying to figure all this out going, how am I going to get across town without being, caught, dressed up, And then they wanted to meet me before the meeting at some restaurant. And I'm like, okay, this is the first time I've ever been out of my house dressed, and now they're going to go to a dang restaurant. I'm like, oh, I was petrified, And I made it through that. And then they said, okay, because they had kind of like a firewall, trying to make sure there wasn't any nut jobs or whatever, so to speak, And so I met with these folks and had a good night and went back. I stayed at my friend's house. He's the first person I ever told, other than a couple family members, and he was one of my best buddies in the Marine Corps. And he was like, I don't give a shit what you look like, as long as, he was pretty cool. I mean, he was very cool about it. And so it was just kind of crazy, like, all right, okay. So that meant that you got a little more comfort level and this and that. And at this point, I still wasn't going out in community locally. And then a couple of years later, it's like, okay, I don't want to keep going to Minneapolis. And I caught wind of a group that was forming. And they didn't have a name yet, but it was run by a counselor therapist out of, back then it was Merit Care. And Alice Christensen was her name. And then there was like 4 of us at the first meeting. And we met in the basement of a church in West Fargo, down in like the Sunday school rooms. And that was powerful. And I'm like, well, we'll get this thing going here. So I started that group and it expanded to what is Tri-State TG right now. So, and some of those members from the original meeting, I don't think any are still alive, to be honest. They were older, and one completed suicide. And so, that was an experience. But then we moved over to the Moorhead Pride and then ended up at the Fargo Pride when they moved out of Moorhead. So that goes back to the beginning of that 25 years ago. I don't know, 20 some years ago.
That's fascinating. I did not know that you were a part of the founding of that group. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was interesting. And then, there was some turmoil within that group at times too, because we had, in the transgender community, sometimes, there's like, we're the transsexual side, so to speak, and then the more gender nonconforming side. But we kept it together because there was a couple strong personalities that would go after each other. And I was kind of the peacemaker and all this deal. I said, the society doesn't look at us any different. Yeah. So let's just all get along. And then back then the I-beam was going.
Yeah.
And so we go to the I-beam after our meetings, it was like on a Saturday, and that was a more comfortable place. So the closet was getting bigger, still hadn't told a bunch of people, but then, just kind of, at least I didn't have to go to Minneapolis. I could go to Fargo, it's closer. And that worked out good. Met a lot of great friends and still good friends today through that. And we do our own little triage. We'd meet for coffee with someone before they would come to the group, and it was more closed back then. Now it's a little more open for folks to participate which is great. And they got great people running that organization. I've stepped back quite a bit over the years. I haven't been there for years, to be honest. And it's kind of, but I run into folks, so it's good.
So you have really built a life out of serving others.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it was, from your service to our country. And I think you had a quote in your Disrupt HR speech, which you we can humble brag for a moment. You said it was number 3 in the world for a while?
For views for a couple months, it was number on our international site. It was number 3 for views for like 2 months.
It's a powerful it's a powerful presentation. Yeah. And so we'll make sure that we link to that in the show notes as well. Yeah. But in there you said you've fought for freedom, but you haven't been able to express your freedom.
Yeah. And that came from, and I've been very involved with the VA and PTSD and mental health, and I'm a peer mentor. I went through PTSD treatment probably 12 or 13 years ago, and I still go to groups there. And, just being me and being out, and I go there as my feminine self to the groups. And, but I was at the VFW, and this is downtown VFW, which I have been on the board there. I was a commander of the Fargo American Legion. I was a founding commandant of the Marine Corps League here locally. So I'm very involved and enjoy working with veterans and that type of stuff. That's what I do for a living. I'm an employment counselor for veterans. One night I was there, Saturday night, with some friends, and a guy comes up to me, right up next to me, and he starts saying, "What the F are you doing here?" And I'm like, having a drink. "What the F are you doing here?" So I have a pretty confident and strong personality, which has been good for me for advocacy, because I have a lot of friends that are transgendered spectrum folks that, they would crumble and it would crush them. And 20 years before that, it probably would have done the same to me. But I said, and then he was going on and on about, I'm a veteran. I said, "So am I." And he said, "Yeah, well, I did." And I seen he had a band on his, wrist or whatever. And I said, "Oh, well, yeah, where did you serve, or who are you with?" And he's like, "I'm Army." I said, "I was the Marine Corps and the Army." He said, "Yeah, well, I was in combat." I said, "I've been in 2 wars." That stuff kept wound up with him, And so then he says, "Well, I'm infantry." I said, "I was in the infantry in the Marine Corps and the Army." So I'm like, and veterans have, kind of sometimes a piston contest, Yeah. And I was one up and I'm on everything, And I said, "Yeah, I was a first sergeant, so I outranked him, and I have a Bronze Star medal, so I have more prestigious medals than he does." And I said, "You picked the wrong effing crossdresser to mess with tonight, buddy." And I said, "Well, you gotta get out of here," and he was carrying on like a fool, And I said, "This is my club. I'm literally a member here. Everybody knows me here."
Yeah.
And he's like, and then they were kicking him out because he's carrying on. And he was screaming, "Oh, they let the tranny stay in here, but the veteran gets kicked out," and just being a fool. And come around the way after that story got out to my veteran friends, he was put in his place, and now he's a different person because of that night. But that shortly after that, I was making a mask at the VA for my PTSD group. And it's like, I don't know if you've seen them or not, but the mask, and on the mask, got like my military side and then a rainbow on the other side of the mask. And then it says, "You're a hero, but you don't belong here. Freedom, but not for you." And so and they still keep, the VA won't give it back. I mean, they'll give it back if I really wanted it, but they use that on their displays all the time because the powerful image and story.
That's incredible. So you had this long storied life of being in service to others, defending people that maybe didn't have as much of a voice. And you've done it while also figuring out like who you are and being comfortable with that, being comfortable being a parent and a spouse and all of those things.
Yeah, it's tricky sometimes, like when the kids were younger and we decided when to tell them and how to tell them. And then that went pretty well. And then I got mobilized for Iraq. And 20 years ago this month, I got the call on a Monday saying, "You're going to be going to Iraq." And then Wednesday was Lenten services, and I was very involved in my church and the community we were living in at the time. And so on Wednesday night, I went up in front of the congregation and said, "Hey, I'm getting mobilized to Iraq. I want to take care of my family while I'm gone." And it was all, hugs and tears. And on Friday, I was outed to the world as a crossdresser. Someone had got a picture off of our Tri-State TG website that we had, and emailed the picture to everybody they knew, who emailed to everybody they knew. And people were printing them out and posting them up at the bars and at the school and everywhere else.
What?
So that was my blowing out of the closet story. I mean, a lot of my friends and most of my family knew, but this was like exploded. So within 5 days, I went from "You're going to Iraq" to "We love you" to Friday and blown out of the closet to Monday, the church council saying "You're no longer welcome here." That was one hell of a week, yeah.
And then if you were mobilized, like, then did you have to leave then?
Well, yeah,
Pretty
then
quick?
a couple months later. So
Okay.
so I moved my wife and my kids up to her hometown. We sold our house and where we were living. And when I come back from Iraq, we'll have a new life kind of thing. Well, in the process of being in Iraq, I just had gotten there. My first wife decided she wanted to divorce me. And there's a lot of other stuff that was going on with that. I mean, a piece of it was being blown out of the closet and being a crossdresser and all that kind of stuff, for sure. But that wasn't the only thing. And, she's moved on and been married and divorced twice since me. And I got custody of the kids when I got home from Iraq and made a new life for myself and my kids and got a current wife that we've been together 18 years and a stepson out of the deal. So, and I got grandkid and I don't want to do any minute now. So,
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'm waiting for the call.
And your wife is fabulous.
She is.
She is so great. And can you talk to us about, like, how did those conversations go early on? Because I would imagine some of the people that are going to be listening to this podcast are like, okay, great. He was able to come out multiple times in there. Like, how do you find the courage to do that and, like, the strength?
Well, the first, and I was getting more comfortable with who I am. And when I got back from Iraq and surviving that experience and mentally changing my brain because of the stuff I had to experience and do over there, we had kind of been friends, or not really friends, but we kind of had bumped into each other a few different times, had some conversations. But the first time we actually went out, I told her right away. I said, "This is who I am," and just FYI, and make it sound like it was easy, but it's taken a lot of work on our relationship and boundaries and that kind of stuff. And sometimes I cross the boundaries and with being too feminine, too much, and she would rather see more of the masculine side, but we've worked out a good relationship throughout the years, and we have a very strong relationship. And sometimes we have bumps in the roads where we have to kind of retune and readjust and get back into our plane of that. But she's very supportive. She's very awesome. And, and then with the kids too. So when they were in high school, I was more in the closet. I was still going out and doing things, doing this, but I wasn't presenting feminine as much as I do now, just because kids are evil. They'll give the business. And, my youngest son had an incident where some kids were giving him a hard time about your dad's gay, dad, blah, blah. So some parent or somebody told their kids, who took it to the school. And my son is huge, my stepson, and he's a hockey player, and had a little incident where he squared that away. And no one ever gave him any more crap about it. So, because they didn't want to be on the wrong side of him. So, but, so those are some of the trials and tribulations of trying to be who you are. And they support me. And he's, like I said, and they've been, we have a good family, good life. We really try to be normal, and we are normal sometimes. This is a normal life. I always, I'm just being me. Sometimes I'm a feminine me and a masculine me, but I'm always the same person,
I love that.
Yeah.
Bradley, we're like 25 minutes in, which I think is the longest that I've gotten without like getting to the question at hand and really the crux of this podcast, which is, what is your pride story? What are you proud of?
Well, I'm proud of being an advocate to all people, especially the veterans and especially the LGBTQ plus community. I've met so many priceless, great friends over the years. And just being the one that can stick their nose out in front if need be and say, here I am, and working my way through working for the state of North Dakota for 30 years. And 20 years ago, I started testifying at the legislature. And, I would literally bring in my medals and lay them on the counter and say, you guys all love veterans in their committees they have, I'm a veteran. I'm asking for your support. What are you going to do about that? Basically kind of thing. And that still, they voted down. You don't need no rights. You don't need no protections because North Dakota doesn't discriminate. So why would we need to have a law? And that's what we got for years. And then the other piece is when the Supreme Court, was it 3.5 years ago, whatever, said that employment, you have rights, employment rights as an LGBTQ person. And then I took that to the state through my chain of command, so to speak, and said, okay, now what? I want to present feminine at work. Everybody knows that I'm not out. I'm very out about who I was, but I wasn't allowed to be feminine presentation at work. And I said, now what? They say I have rights now after all these years of fighting for my rights, literally. And now I got, and so it took, a couple months and cabinet meetings with literally the governor and the cabinet talking about me and what are we going to do about this veterans rep down in Fargo that wants to start coming to work looking like a woman and that type of thing. And, they said, okay, we can do this. And then they want to do a bunch of training, which was fine. Like diversity training and that kind of stuff. So after that happens, then on the 1st of September, you can start being feminine. And I'm like, okay. So I was cordial but knowing that I want this stuff to move along here too, and we had a great support from people in my chain of command. And so it's been almost 3.5 years now that I've been working as my feminine self in this community and going from one day to the next. And, all my coworkers, of course, knew, and a lot of people in the community know, but then I started. One day I was at a ribbon cutting masculine, and 2 days later I show up feminine, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? But I talked to some people in leadership at the chamber saying, hey, this is going to happen. So I've always tried to be, open about it too, like not surprise,
Mm-hmm.
But, it has surprised some people, and a lot of times people say, like, you're the most masculine person I know. I can't believe this. And I'm like, well, that's what you get for judging,
Yeah.
So
You're like, well, you think that, and come hang out with me on Saturday night.
But and having myself established in this community as one of the veterans that does a lot for the community and that kind of stuff, that also helps me with my platform, so to speak. Oh. Because I can go, this is what a vet looks like, and I've gotten tremendous respect and support from the veteran community. So they are like, yeah, we fought for rights too. And I said, you don't have to accept me. You don't have to even like me, but you won't disrespect me. Mm. That's kind of my thing, because that's my mantra. And I'm not asking you to join me and start, cross-dressing, so to speak, but you're not going to disrespect me because I've had enough disrespect. I don't like it, And then I get energy from others too, that in the community and other people that are living their life. And, I have, my grandson and my son-in-law are black, and so I have this whole eclectic, family, and I got an autistic son, and I got I got all the, areas. So it's like, just let people be people. I've been in hell more than once. I've seen horrible countries. I've been in them. I lived in them. I've fought in them. And we're all wrapped around the axle over stupid stuff. That's the way I look at it, who you love or what you look like. And we're still fighting civil rights stuff, and women's rights and all these other groups that it's like, why are we there? I've been over in Europe, and they have a co-ed military 20-some years ago where they literally use the same bathrooms. They'll have a lock on the shower door or the stall, but other than that, the bathrooms, co-ed, so to speak, and it's just pretty amazing. I was denied promotion to sergeant major which is the highest enlisted rank you can get in the Army. Because when I went to Iraq, I was the first sergeant, but I was outed. And they tried to stop me from going to Iraq, but my commander says, well, hell no, this is the best first sergeant I've ever had. It's not going to happen. And then rumors happen, in the small town, oh, you're just doing this so you can get out of going to Iraq or, just crazy talk like that. And no, that's not the fact. But people just talk, and they get crazy talk. And then I got back from Iraq with all these accolades and medals, and our unit was fantastic. We got a unit award, and about 6-8 months later, I was up number one on the promotion list for the state for sergeant major. And I was called into the office, and the colonels came in from Bismarck and said, "We're not promoting you." I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, because you cross-dress. And if you sign this form saying you won't do this for a year, we'll reevaluate your leadership." I said, "Really? I just got a Bronze Star for leadership in Iraq. I didn't see none of you guys there." And I'm like, "Okay, so let's, I think it's time for me to retire." "Oh, we don't want to leave you. You're a great leader. You're great this and that." "Well, have I ever showed up to formation in a dress? I have a uniform to wear, and I wear it, And so, and like, well, we still have to. I said, "Well, I'm not signing that, and I'm about done here. I've done 22 years. It's time for me to check out." So I kind of left on a sour note from the Army, because this was after Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This was in the repeal. It was in 2007.
Okay.
And so then they, I think it was 2011 is when they repealed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So then people could serve open and honest or whatever. And so if that would happen after 2011, I would have been a sergeant major, So just, that kind of craziness that goes on. And, I bump into people still once in a while at different events or different things that people try to start some trouble for me. When I first started coming out and presenting and working feminine, there'd be some people, not my clients, not my coworkers, but like some people you bump into in the community that would say, or try to start trouble behind my back, trying to get me kicked out of the chamber ambassadors or off the military affairs committee. And it's like, and I got support from their leadership saying, "Oh, that's not going. You go before Bradley goes." And, so I had, I've had a lot of great allies that I built up a team that, which is great, that I don't have to do all this work myself.
Yeah.
I've got others to go to bat for me,
Well, I think one of the things that you do an amazing job of is you build community by welcoming people in versus figuring out how you're different. Right. And I think we've seen that in your work with the chamber. We've seen that with your work with veterans. We've seen that in your work with Tri-State Transgender. Like you do a really excellent job of just like inviting people in to create a community. And I think that that's super, super commendable.
Yeah. And I've always been like that. I've always been the one that would fight the bully for someone else. In high school, I remember whatever, someone's bullying somebody. I'm like, "No, that's not going to happen on my watch."
Yeah.
And I'll be rolling over there because, physically I'm deteriorating over time, but, back in the day, yeah, right. And, I'm like, that's not going to happen here. And not be the one standing up to upperclassmen or out in the community, wherever. It's like, that's not going to happen here. I mean, it's happening in third world countries where, people are mistreating their family members, and I'm just like, that's not going to happen when I'm around, And so I can't help myself. That's who I am. My wife works for a very multicultural, multi-project here in town, and a lot of the people come from all over the world. And when they come to town, we're like the welcome wagon. Come over to the house. Let's have a beer or cook a steak or, so she's very, very welcoming person as well. So we make a good team that way. So
incredible.
Yeah.
I want to kind of jump to our next question, which I'm really curious to your perspective on this, because you have so many different perspectives, whether that be, your ability to appear more feminine or more masculine, your work in the military, the work with the military that you do today. What does pride mean to you?
Pride to me is respect. I mean, basically inclusion. Everybody's welcome here. You should be free to be yourself, because me and many others they always say, "Oh, the veterans give us freedom and this and that." Well, I've seen people that don't have freedom, and I've seen people disrespected or killed because of the color of their skin or their religious beliefs or their whatever situation they're in. And pride is that bring everybody together, and let's all just, it's what it is. I mean, people are who they are, and let's just all be ourselves. If you're not, as long as you're not hurting anybody or doing anything evil to someone, we should be able to just go through our day and it shouldn't matter what we look like or who we love or on all this kind of stuff. Let's just enjoy life, and we all got to get through this thing together. And I've had more than too many of my friends I've known have completed suicide, so I'm big trying to advocate, for that. Like, let's, talk to somebody, it gets better, all that kind of mantra. And, I've literally talked to people and I've had veteran friends. I've taken guns out of their hands in their living rooms when someone called me. So it's a powerful experience, but I just try to do the best I can to get through life too. So
I think that's great. Final question that I have for you is, as you think about your life, your career, your family, what are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for many things. I'm grateful for my family, for my coworkers and my friends, and that I finally, after almost 27 years of working, I can actually work as my feminine self, because that's kind of always been the mantra or the dream that I had, was like, I need to be me and my best self. And so I'm just grateful for people like you and this podcast here, just getting information out, being able to tell my story. And I've known that others have been educated because of my story, and I'm grateful that I have the platform. Being a veteran helps, and being who I am helps spread the word. And people can't just say you're a crazy person, or you're confused, or you're whatever, No, I'm not confused. I know exactly who I am, and I'm very happy with who I am. And I'm happy with the life I've built. Some people, they have to, whatever,
I think that's perfect. And I super appreciate it. And I appreciate you trusting and sharing your story with us today. So thanks for being on.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Fantastic. Well, Bradley, thanks again for joining us on Pride Stories, the podcast. And thanks for being brave enough to share your story.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is good.
Thank you for listening to Pride Stories, the podcast. I'm your host, Max Kingan, and it's been an honor to bring this story to your ears. Pride Stories is proudly presented by Towel Story Co. and Studio. We have an incredible team that makes this podcast possible every single week. If you've been inspired, moved, or entertained by anything you've heard in this episode, please consider supporting our mission. You can do that by subscribing to the podcast, leave a 5-star review, or simply share it with a friend or family member. Your support helps keep the stories alive and resonating. And if you feel compelled to share your own Pride story, we'd be honored to listen. Please visit the link in the description of this episode to get in touch. No matter where you are in your journey, whether you're out and proud or just finding your voice, remember, you have a story to tell, and it deserves to be heard.